All right, welcome to the front shock video that we're changing our shocks on our 01 Ford Ranger. This is going to be part 2, or however you want to do it. You can do this as part 1. All right, to do the front shocks, you're going to need a 15mm socket or wrench. I would prefer a wrench because that stud right there. You can do it with the wheel on the truck. You don't have to take the wheel off at all for any of this. However, you are going to need a jack because the shock comes out from the center of the coil spring. You'll need I believe it's a 13mm socket for the 2 nuts on the bottom. It might be a 10. I did this yesterday and I don't remember. Anyway, to do the shocks, you need your wrenches. This one here is going to break it loose, and this one here is going to spin the nut off. You got to lift up your flap right here on the upper control arm. You open up your flap, and there's your nut right there. It's a crusty mess. So if it don't break loose, and this ain't going to, you need to rotate this around to where you can get a pair of vice grips on that top right there. I would PB the living garbage out of this thing because the other side I did not, and I fought that thing for at least 45 minutes, but it eventually came off. And it was in better shape. It had oil on it. It was in better shape. So if you want to pull this upper cover off, you can. You just got to pull these plastic clips here. You can pull these 3 here, and this 4th one here that is, well, it's going to have to be reset. And you can take this whole big apron thing and flop it over the back if you don't want to hold this thing up all day. Perfectly fine. I've done it that way before. And then when you're done, just flop it back over, put your Christmas trees back in, and you're done. I'm not messing with it because, like on this corner over here, they tend to rip. And this is actually a party or inner fender. Kind of important. So whatever steps you need to take for that, go ahead and take them before you start this. I'm going to go grab a pair of vice grips, and we're going to get on that flat piece on the top. I'm going to spray that threaded portion down real good, and then we'll break that thing loose. Alright, I got it sprayed down. This is how you sit your vice grips. Close them by hand, run your adjuster all the way down. Open them up. And then when you get, I think we're going to have to probably pull a couple Christmas trees on this thing because this is nowhere near as loose as the other side is. The other side was a lot looser than this, but I think we'll manage. Find your flat. It's kind of facing a little bit to the side here, so I don't know if you can see it or not. And you want to kind of clamp onto it like that, and then you want to hold it with one hand and turn your adjuster out until with as much force as you can close that. When you can get it to turn like that, you're in good shape. All right, now that we did that, we got to take our vice grips back off temporarily because we got to get our wrench on. Get your wrench down on there. You can set it any angle you want. Just get your wrench down on that nut right there. And then lock your vice grips back down on top of your stud here. Alright, and then you want to just kind of pull that. And you see how it's still moving? That's because our vice grips aren't tight enough. So you got to tighten them up some more. And then we want to clamp this down. Find our sweet spot there. And you want to go ahead and break this bolt loose here. If you want, and you don't want to go through all of this, you can always cut the stud off since we're not reusing this. I'm going to do something about this cover right here because this is getting on my last damn nerve. So let me go get my nice little trim tool and we're going to take that cover off. Alright, we're going to take these Christmas trees out. Let's start over here on this corner. Get my tool to grip where it needs to be, and we can go ahead and there we go. That one's out. And we'll put them back in when we're done, so you don't have to worry about that too much. See, at least this way we can move this cover out of the way so we can get to our shock a little better. Because something tells me, just off of my initial assessment, this thing is going to be a real pain in the butt. I don't like pains in my butt. So let's see, we got to get our... And if you break a Christmas tree, it's not the end of the world. You're going to eventually, if you do this job long enough, you're going to be breaking these things on a regular basis. But if you do it right, and you put a little bit of wiggle into it, you won't break none of them. If I break them on this truck, I don't care. I've got a whole box full of Christmas trees. I don't care. I just want to get this cover to where I can do this with it. See that? Opens it right up. Now we can see what we're doing. All right. So we got a little bit of rust on this thing, so we got to find a nice flat spot for our clamp to sit on here. Like that. And we're going to go ahead and do the open end to get this broke loose, even though I recommend doing closed end on it. And it came loose. That was unexpected. Now you take your ratcheting wrench and you put it on. Make sure you're on the right direction here. And you're going to hold the top of the shock with your vice grips, and you're going to ratchet wrench this sucker off. And it's going to fight you, so you're going to have to just keep going with it like this. Ah! See that? It's going to fight you, so you want to keep your pliers locked. If it turns on you, you're going to have to tighten up your pliers. Make sure these are on as tight as you can get them. And if that top breaks like it's going to, see how it's trying to round off up here? We're going to have to turn it around and try to put it back down. Because what we're coming across is we're coming across some thread problems. All right, this side, we might have to take the tire off. Because in order to get that out, we're probably going to have to jack the truck up just a little bit to where we can get underneath that bushing, and we're going to probably have to get the cutting tools out and cut that off of there. Because this wants to round off because it's all rusted out, and these threads are trash. So in this situation, because I could probably get in there with my cutting tool with the tire on, but I want to take the tire off because you're going to get more room. And so let's see if we can get the truck jacked up. Let's get our jack stand in position. We're going to have to put the truck on a jack stand to do this. Get your jack underneath the truck. Wherever you think you can get at it, be able to get to your bottom bolt safely. I'm going to try to do it on this lower control arm. And I'm going to try to get it on this first lip of the lower control arm. That way, if I need to, I can get in from the back and get the bolts out from the back. But we got to jack the truck up so we can get to that. Let's see, make sure I got that centered right. We got a plate problem here. We got to turn our plate. Right. There we go. Be very careful when you're jacking up on one half of the control arm. I know these are beefy pieces, but if you're not careful, you're going to bend something. And changing these control arms are a pain in the butt. I don't want to do that today. Alright, so we got our truck up. Alright, we're going to have to pause for a moment because we got rain coming. Alright, we waited for the rain to pass, which it didn't really rain too much, but that's okay. And we're getting ready to pull our tire off so we can get in there and get that top taken off that shock so we can finish this shock job. Now I gotta take the tire off. Normally you don't have to take tire off when you do these shocks, but this one it wants to be a elevated pain in the backside, so we're going to just go ahead and take tire off real quick. These are 19mm bolts, and if you got it in the air, you want to go ahead and put your foot up against it, hold it to so you can break the torque on it. Works every time. Yeah, normally you don't have to take tire off to do shocks on this. It's just this one here being as rusty as it is. It's gonna need some extra time and attention that only a wheel off job can provide. So scooch you in here so you can see what we're doing here. See, we got that all opened up in there, you can see everything. See here? Okay. Shock comes through the bottom. We've got the jack right here, which is why I tell you this is super sketch, because we got it just on the lip of the lower control arm. That's why I have the jack stand on standby. You see we've got the spring kind of sitting parallel with the ground. That's because when we get the top taken off, we got to get underneath, take out 2 bolts underneath, or 2 nuts, and then you're going to see this thing fall through the ground. We got the jack stand ready in case we have to lower the truck to reposition the jack to be able to get the shock out. So, show you what we're going to use for our cutting apparatus today. We're going to use our exhaust cutter here. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get it to fit in there. We're going to find out in a minute. Oh, this is going to be super dicey. Let's see. We could probably cut the bolt, but then I don't want to cut the bolt. I just want to go like straight across. I don't know how we're going to do this. Because you don't want to cut into this. This is part of your frame. Let's see if we can chop that nut off. What do you think? Think we can do that? I'm going to see if I can get in there. See if I can get in there. Let's see if we cut it down long ways like that, we might be able to get somewhere. I want to make sure I'm not going to catch nothing on fire under here. We gotta reset our thing here. Does that sometimes. I wish I had a cutter that would go in a different direction. See if I can hit that with a hammer and break that free. Should be able to. Grab a hammer. Yeah, you can see I got some of it cut through. Let's see if we can cut it now. If we go at it from the bottom like this, see if we can get a nice good slice on it there. Let's see if we can break that bolt. Or at least get that nut off of there. Oh, I see. We're not even cut all the way through on this side yet. We got to finish cutting it through. I thought we were cut through already. Make sure that we're not chewing up the front of our tool here. Alright, let's rotate it and cut the other side. We should be good to go at that point. Grab my crowbar here so I can turn it. And see, we're cutting down into the plastic there, or the rubber bushing, which is what we want. Here, grab me a pair of pliers real quick. That didn't sound good. That didn't sound good at all. Alright. Rotate this over here to this direction. We gotta finish cutting it down this side here. Once we get it into the washer, the nut's been rendered ineffective at that point. We should be able just to beat it off the end of the shock. Let's see if we can pry that out now with our screwdriver. It wants to be a continued pain in the butt. So let's see if we can cut some more on it then. Yeah, it's chopping the nut up, which is what we want. Alright, let me see if I can separate that and pry this up. See, we're chewing up the nut. Alright, despite all my efforts, I am successful. For a minute there, I got sick of it and decided to cut my top of the bolt off using my jigsaw. Then I remembered at the last minute that I had a pair of bolt cutters. I could have just cut it with bolt cutters. But instead, hey, that's hot. Let me show you what I did. I cut the top of the shock stud off. Then I beat the hell out of this with my cutting tool that you saw me use earlier. Then, because this has threads down inside it, you have to go down into the washer itself. After you do that, you'll get into the thread region, take a great big crowbar, put it underneath that lip and just beat on it till it pops off. And get our bushing out. That's our bushing. Didn't want to cut into that because that's going to start smelling like burning rubber, and that's the last thing you need right now is to smell burning rubber. So, we're done with the top. Let's go ahead and move to the bottom, which you can probably see better this go around here. Yeah, I was pretty crappy with my camera angles with the driver's side, and that's why it didn't get recorded very well. Alright, so we've got two studs that sit underneath this lower control arm. And if I remember right, those were 13 millimeter. Before I pull those bolts, we're going to put the jack stand underneath the frame In case the jack gets stupid, I don't die. I don't want to die at the hands of my truck. You have to jack the coil spring up parallel with the ground to get the shock out from underneath the coil spring. And those bolts look pretty good too. I think they'll come right out. They look like they're 10 millimeter. Let me go grab one. Out of the back and out of the Alright, now we're going to get these bolts taken out. They look like they're in good shape, so you have to reuse your hardware with this shock that we're putting on this truck, because the only thing it comes with is a replacement nut for the top. You can see the two bolts right here, these two nuts right here. That's what we're taking out. So I'm going to try to set you so you can see that, but I'm not going to be able to. Maybe, I don't know. Let me see here. I can get you in a spot where you're not in my way. Kinda. There we go. That'll work. Alright, 13 millimeter. And we got to get these loose. You can grease these up with some PB if you want to, or the WD, or whatever you want to do on these. I didn't have any problems with these coming loose on the other side. Yeah, see, they come fairly loose. Yeah, see, pretty easy. And then you get this side loose over here. And they come loose pretty easy. I mean, I didn't have a problem at all having the other side loosened up. Oh, sorry about that. Moved our perfectly good camera angle out of the way here. And you want to just take these down. And then here comes the part that I'm telling you about. When you get ready to pull the shock down, it's only going to come down so far. Now, if you were successful and didn't have to cut the top of the shock off to get the shock down, you're going to have that extra 5 inches of thread you have to navigate with. If you had to cut yours off like I did, then just kind of stick around here, because we're about to find out how this thing's coming out. Now you might notice that the shock's starting to lower down. I don't know if you can see that or not. There's like a huge glare on this thing, and I'm so sorry. There's a huge glare right there. Let's see if I can get you a better view here. Anyway, if you can look to the corner of your screen, you'll see the shock coming down. You also notice that it's got a C-notch in it. That's what we call that. We call that a C-notch. You can also know it as a cutout, if you want to call it a cutout. Like I said, be very careful on these nuts, because you have to reuse them. You do not get replacements. So set them somewhere where they're not going to get lost. And then when you get ready to pop this down, hold it with one hand. Finish taking the nut off with the other. That way this thing doesn't fall on top of you. You might have an issue with some threads towards the end. So what we're going to do is we're going to loosen that up a couple turns, and then we're going to flip it back, and we're going to kind of clean those threads up on the very end. Because the last thing you need is to have the ends of this stud all galled up where you can't get your nut back on it. So we're going to go ahead and finish getting this nut loose. Sorry about that. I keep knocking you around. Now you got a big old glare where you need to be looking. I promise I'll do better next time. Now, sometimes on these studs you'll get a little extra rusty on them. So you got to kind of rock them back and forth a little bit. But then the nut should come right off. This one wants to come off. There it goes. Probably going to spray these before you put them back on. Then you want to lower the shock down like this. This side's coming out better than the driver's side did. The driver's side, I had to rotate it. And there's your shock. All right, now we're going to go over to the table. Now that we got our shock out, I'm going to put our attaching hardware on our tires so that we don't lose it, because the nuts are the same color as the ground, and I will lose them if I don't do that. So now we're going to take our busted shock. You might see this here. There's supposed to be a thing in there. It probably rotted out years ago, and that's probably why this thing squeaks. My truck has a horrible squeak. It's had it for years. I'm guessing that's the culprit right there. So now you get to see the new shock, which I have to go get, so I'll be right back. Okay, so as I mentioned in the back shock video, we're trying out a new product from MasterPro, because now they do shocks, which I've never heard of them doing shocks. But here's the part number for this truck if you decide to go this road. And I usually use Monromatics. It's what I have on all my vehicles that I've done shocks on. I've always used Monromatics. Even on customer cars, I use Monromatics because they're a good quality shock and you don't have any issues. Okay, now let me bring this to your attention because you're going to come across this. If you have the original Motorcraft shocks on your truck, the end that goes on the bottom looks like that. This is what you get on 99% of the aftermarket shocks you buy, except for KYB and Motorcraft. All right, this will work, but in order to get it to work, you have to use a pair of vice grips. You have to clamp this side and you have to rotate this until it lines up on both sides of the bottom of the shock tower. If you don't do that, you're going to fight this. An alternative to having to rotate this thing is you can take your cutting tool and cut the end off right here. Cut this end off right here on one side of, so like you could cut it on this side and then leave this side closed, and then that will allow you to put this stud on, and then you can locate this stud on the other side if you want to do that. I almost did that on the driver's side, but I refrained from doing so because I figured there had to be a better way. Your replacement nut is going to be, I believe it's a 14 millimeter, kind of like in your, if you were doing Monromatics, I think they're 14 millimeter. You have a prep kit, okay? You have a prep kit. And I'll show you how this goes together because we have to prep our shock before we put it in. All right, so you're gonna have 2 washers and 2 rubber bushings. The flat washers go on the ends of like that, okay? So we're gonna prep it for installation. So you're gonna put your flat washer down like that, and you're gonna set your rubber washer to where the step up is facing inward. You don't want to do it this way because it'll be wrong. Now, having said that, you're going to have your frame right here. You're going to put this one facing down, okay? Then you're going to have your flat washer that goes on the end, and you're going to have your nut. So it looks like this, okay? So you're going to have your frame in between, and this is going to go around your frame, and then you're going to have your nut, okay? Don't tighten this nut down until you are on the ground, because we have to smash this to a certain degree. You have to be at ride height when you do this. So now that we got our shock ready, let's go see if we can get it installed. Okay, so you can see our bolts pretty good now. We're going to put a little bit of spray on them to ease an installation so that we don't have any issues with the nuts and everything. Of course, we're going to have the one nut that got stuck on there, but that's okay. You want to grab your 2 bottom nuts. You want to have them sitting over here on the side ready to go. All right. You got your ratchet ready. Make sure it's set to on. We're going to take our shock And we're going to angle our shock up into the truck. Now this is where you need to jack the truck up higher, okay? So now we need to jack the truck up higher so that we can get the top of the shock into the coil spring. This is where things can get dicey, especially when you're only held on the end of your control arm there. So what you got to do is you got to easily and slowly jack your truck up. Make sure that as you jack your truck up, you are also adjusting your jack stand in case the jack falls out. Your truck doesn't end up with a rotor in the dirt. Because if you remember, we had to take the tire off to get the... Alright, I think that's good enough. We had to take tire off in order to get in there and to get that top of the shock out. All right, now you got your truck jacked up a substantial height. Yours might be different than mine. Bear in mind, this is for two-wheel drive applications. Four-wheel drive applications are totally different than this. If you can fit the end of your shock up inside the shock tower, you might have to wiggle it around a little bit. We need to jack it up about maybe one more turn, one more pull. Then we'll have enough room to get our shock up into our coil spring. Do this very, very carefully. Also, at the same time, adjust your jack stand. This is probably the sketchiest shock job I've ever done in the history of ever. Now keep in mind, if you have a two-post lift or access to a two-post lift, now would be a good time to call in some favors. Because if I had said lift, this thing would be a piece of cake. I wouldn't even have to be worrying about it. And you see what I was talking about earlier, about having to rotate. Of course, we got to get the top up. You see how they don't want to go on? We have to rotate them. So I'm going to do something different than I did on the driver's side. I'm going to put the top, well, at least to the point of, we're going to put a flat washer on the top to hold the shock in place, and we're going to put our nut on the top. We're not going to tighten it down. We're just going to use the nut to hold the shock in place. See that? I'm going to show you what I had to do on the driver's side, except this time we're doing it a little differently. All right, you see how that goes? You can rotate this, and you're going to end up with the same result. So rotating it doesn't do any good. What you have to do is you have to grab this with your pliers, and you have to rotate this bottom attachment. You just got to kind of rotate it like this until you can get it to go on the shock, just like that. Once you get it on the shock, put your bolts on. Don't worry about it being bent, because when you tighten the nuts up, it's going to flatten out. See that? It'll flatten out when we put the shock all the way up. You have to rotate these because of that notch being absent. See? Now we can take our socket, or your ratcheting wrench if you used one, and we can tighten up our shock on the top, on bottom here. Doesn't matter if you rotate these from side to side, because as you can see, I hope you can see, as we tighten up the one nut, it's pushing the shock upward. When the nut stops turning, when it gets to the point where it starts to get tight, you want to go over here and you want to start running this side up. Why you put blaster on it is because you're going to have a little bit of rust inside your threads, and you want to clean your threads up without damaging your hardware. If you're wondering, those studs are part of the lower control arm. They are welded to the control arm. So if for some reason yours break off, you have to replace the lower control arm. There's no way around it. All right, now you want to get these snug, about, oh, I'd say about 18 foot-pounds maybe, or as tight as you want to go with them. There we go, nice and snug. All right, we're done on the bottom. Let's move you back to the top and we'll finish the top. You see our brand new stud sticking out up top there. And we're gonna get our legs out here on our pods so that we can get a good view of everything. Now you can leave the truck at the ungodly height that you have it at, because bear in mind we got to put the tire back on. Alright, so you can't see the top of the, let me see if I can get you to the top of the shock here. There we go, that's better. You see the top of the shock real good. Now you can see our flat washer resting on top of the frame. Now we got to take this apart. Okay, so if we did our job right, we should have our flat washer on the bottom along with our first rubber bushing. And so to check that, you can reach your hand up underneath and see if it's there. Or you can take your finger, and since you have to line this up anyway, pull this back till it's lined up. And you'll feel the rubber bushing down inside there. So we did our job right. Push that bushing down just like that. Put your flat washer concave side down. I think I said that right. Spin your nut down. All right. We want a 14 ratcheting wrench for that. Let me go grab my 14 ratcheting wrench and I'll be right back. Okay, take your 14 wrench and you're going to spin this down. You're only going to take it till this flat, the flat part of the bushing hits the top of the frame. We're not going to squish it just yet. I'm going to run it down till it's right there, just before we start to squish. Right here. Can't squish it with it on a jack. Has to be on the ground at ride height. Because if you try to squish it this way, you're going to damage your bushing. So let's get our tire put back on. We'll finish this part up and then we can put our inner liner back up. And then we would be doing measurements in as far as how much of a height difference you get between worn out shocks and new shocks, but because I deleted the first video when I did the driver's side, we don't have those measurements. So it's kind of pointless to do measurements at this level because we don't have any measurements to go off of. So, but let's get our tire put back on so we can get our squish done up there on the top of the... You can kind of see how high we had to get the tire up. That's how, let me show you back here. I can stick my foot underneath the tire. That's how high we had to get the truck up off the ground in order to get the shock in. Once you get the shock in though, it's a piece of cake after that. So, we'll put our lug nuts back on our tire here. You can barely see what I'm doing here. Yeah, in case you haven't seen the back shock video, we're going to have a little bit of a programming thing going on because next week I got to finish getting ready to go to New York. It's my yearly visit to my mother's house. And I will take the tripod. We might get some good Dakota videos from my mom's 88 Dakota that I built for her 2 years ago. She's having some issues with it, so there's a good chance I might be able to get some video out of that for you, hopefully. depending on what's going on with it, because we gotta get it ready for state inspection, so she's got to do that. So stick your foot up against the tire, hold it in place. We're not going to torque the tire right now. We'll do that later because I got to do some work on the back tire. So I'll do that off camera. I'll go around and torque tires back up. Now we got to pull your jack stand out from underneath your vehicle and let your vehicle down on the ground. After you get it down on the ground, we can go ahead and squish our shock. I don't know if you're going to be able to see this, but I'll do my best to show it to you. Let our truck down nice and slow. Make sure she's all the way down on the ground. Or he, if it's a mail truck. That's kind of fun, mail truck. Pull your jack out. All right. We'll go ahead. Of course, we can put our inner fender back in when we're done here. All right, I don't know. Let me see if I can get you a good view inside there. Let me zoom in enough to where you can see what's going on here. All right, you can kind of see what we're doing here. I got you at max zoom. All right, so we're going to squish this down to where it's hard to explain, but let me show it to you. Let me lift the hood up so you can see better. I think part of my glare is coming from the sun being in the back. Now if I lift the hood up, you'll get better light. Okay. All right. Oh, that's much better. You can definitely see what we're doing now. All right, so you want a slight smush on that. So you're going to take your ratchet, you're going to crank this down, and you're going to keep cranking till you see it start to bulge. It might take a few minutes for us to get there because right about there. See the slight bulge? That's what you want. Now, if you were successful enough to get this off and you still have the old one, the threads will be the same length on the old one. You can, before you take the nut off, you can count your threads, kind of like you would on a tie rod end. And then on your new shock, make a paint stick mark somewhere like where the top of the nut should sit. And then just run your nut down until you see that paint mark sitting above your nut, and then you'll be fine. You can do that. Or like I said, you can count your threads down, and then just as you tighten this up, count your threads, stuff like that, you know. Whatever makes you feel good and whatever gets the job done. Okay? You can do it many different ways. All right, so we got to get our fender cover back in. So we're going to flip this back around. This here rests inside the upper control arm here, like that. That's how it's supposed to sit, okay? And of course you got your Christmas trees that hold it in, so we'll get the Christmas trees out of the truck. We'll go ahead and put those back in. And of course, if you broke any, you're gonna have to pop the old ones out of the holes in the fender, so you got room to put the new ones in. So we'll put this first one right here in the middle here. I've never taken these out before, so I don't know how hard they are to go back in. They don't seem too bad. You want to push them through the rubber first and then put them in the plastic second, like that. And you want to come over here and you want to do that again over here. Push that in and then push that in, and you're done. And that'll do it for us today, folks. We have changed the front shocks on our 01 Ford Ranger. Now, I did something else on my video that got deleted. I'm going to do on this one because it's important. I'm going to pull the zoom back first of all so you can see the full scope of things. 93 and up, this is the way you want to do it. If it's a 83 to 92, let me show you how they did it. The way they did it on the 83 to 92 Rangers, by the way, there's our bed. We got to knock the dent out of the back of it so that we can put it back on. The way they do it on that one is completely different. On theirs, this is an 89 Ranger. So let me show you how they did this. In 93, they did a complete redesign of the frame and everything. So yours, if you have an older truck, looks like that. You don't have to jack the truck up. You just have a bolt you take out from the bottom, and you got that bolt on the top. The back of the truck's the same as this truck. So you might see us pull the shocks on an upcoming video that we might do for our 1,000 subscribers. So if you want to see that, start getting people over to the Ranger Auto Repair YouTube channel, which is where you're at now, and get some subscriptions going. And when I hit 1,000 videos, you might see a Project Rusty video, which is what I'd prefer to do for you guys, because you guys love these old Ranger trucks. And if I can get you a good truck video for your 1,000, then maybe we'll do something even better for 10,000, and so on, and everything of that nature. But we're going to call it done here. I got a lot more work to do on this truck. We got to get it ready for just being a shop truck. So we'll catch you on the next one.